how much would I give to not have been born in Afghanistan and be born in Brazil instead? And how much would I give to not being born in 1800s versus when I was born? Or how much would I give to being born without a degenerative disease? All those things are not my doing. And it gives you a little bit more humility about the fact that I just landed there. And there's no such a discussion as I deserve to be here. I do not believe this trade-off between efficiency and fairness, the way people are stating, is correct, because we are not also thinking about the benefits of reducing unfairness. We do not know the counterfactual world where there would not be only Steve Jobs in the world coming out of the United States, but there will be Steve Jobs come out of Pakistan.
The thing that concerns me about AI is it seems to me that work matters a lot for people. An easy way to be unhappy is to lose your job. To me, it feels like an extreme version of deindustrialization. We just haven't had a good answer to deindustrialization. A lot of people got really hurt by it. And I think this is just going to be a much bigger version of that. You might think that you're not going to get touched by it, but you will.
I do not see a coherent way of allowing for this arms race that would not lead to pretty much close to 100% of the value added that is created in the world is owned by a company or a country or whatever. And that means, what are we talking about? Dictatorship? That is just not a self-coherent way. This is a world where we all are going to lose power. Even the people, they are extremely selfish, that do not care about any other people. They should be in the same bandwagon. If they are not thinking this through. Even Elon Musk tomorrow may own nothing. We are in a very nice position to have enough empathy with people because we're all under the veil of ignorance. The moment we create some form of coordination, because now all this value add is taxed, that is the only possible way I can see where you don't see this kinds of arms race in AI. It is the only self-coherent way that we can actually survive as human species that I can think of. I think we need to first define what our objective is if you are to think about what will be the algorithm where something is going to emerge. And I thought that part of the conversations that we had last time, it was very hard to pin things down because on the one hand, we wanted nuance, but on the other hand, we were aware that people also want entertainment and they want to minimize cognitive dissonance, right? So I was wondering, what do you think about that?
So someone who I respect gave a retirement talk, more focused on engineering, thinking a little bit about what's the validation of technology or the demonstration of technology. And in some sense, it speaks for itself in terms of its usefulness. That's the point he was making. That we know that we have a new technology when it's useful, when we use it for something. And when we think about the algorithm that people like you and I might want, maybe what we need to do is show some of the ways that having this kind of nuanced approach is useful. Maybe it's error correction. Maybe it's finding things that you wouldn't have found otherwise. I can think of things in my own research, but I'm also thinking more broadly, like how we think about social problems, how we think about economic problems. But you can think about this obviously in physical sciences and in all these other kinds of applications where having this kind of mindset, I think, gets you to more useful solutions or approaches.
I see what you mean. So I think there are two aspects to it, right? One is we could, let's say, wear the hat of a policymaker and we can think about, okay, so how could we create a kind of algorithm that solves the coordination problem that we all have and achieve something that is best for everybody, even though it may not achieve, at least in the short run, what each individual wants, right? But I think that's perhaps too paternalistic for our taste. So this wouldn't be the first way that you and I would like to approach that. And I think what you're after here is what would be something that would demonstrate enough value for each individual so that they naturally internalize this externality problem and they start doing exactly what we want them to do,
Yeah.
right? How we design an incentive scheme where each one would do exactly what we want to do. And I agree. I think that's the goal, right? That's how we build social norms. Like the reason people sometimes improve their habits is because they realize that it helps, right? So yes, we can start thinking about how we can create social norms where nuance emerges by perhaps raising the awareness of things that people like you and I may be more aware than most people. Like we have been enough times in system 2 to verify how stupid our system 1 is. And that is helpful, right? Because we have seen the benefit of moving to a more analytical side in our lives, in the way we make choices. And we also have seen sometimes when we don't do that, how we make bad choices, right? We generate bad consequences for us. So I think a lot of people might be stuck. There's a reason why you and I are talking about that, because we care about that, because we are in a privileged position to have obtained more benefit from moving on from system 1 to system 2.
It might be helpful to give some examples. I mean, I can think of some for me, but I'm wondering if you have some examples in your own mind from some of your own research of those cases when you realized that you needed more nuance.
Yeah. So this is the story of my life. So for instance, in my work on segregation, I started working on it thinking that segregation was a bad thing. And I wanted to reduce it. And you can even see that in my early papers, in the way I was writing. I was just thinking about that from that perspective. But over the years, I started realizing that there is sort of a paradox, which is segregation is just what shows up when people act on their differences. And reducing segregation, therefore, it's almost like a way to minimize the way people can express themselves. And when I realized that, it became very obvious to me that that is a problem. I think in general, over the years, as I'm growing older, in my research, in my life, whenever I feel I'm getting closer to the truth, I find a paradox. I find that I cannot say something that is good or bad. It's kind of good and bad. That's exactly the cognitive dissonance that we talked last time. It's almost like I have such a hard time progressing from there because I no longer think it's a clear-cut situation. And I think this is almost like a good signal for me that I'm going in the right direction when I arrive at a paradox. Because if I have not yet arrived at a paradox, if you ask me a question and I have a very clear opinion, these days I become a little skeptical. As in, what do I yet know?
So, okay, I have a number of comments about this. Two things I'd want to come back to. One is just kind of open-endedness versus objectives. I think the other is decision rules. Like, how do you make decisions? We were talking earlier about how do you make decisions when there's the difficulty of aggregating preferences or different perspectives. But even in your own mind, right? You have all these different perspectives that you can kind of accommodate. And what you're saying is maybe the older you've gotten or the more that you've grown, the more that you can accommodate all of those and you can kind of sit with those and handle that. But a lot of times we have to make decisions, right? Whether it's a policy decision, whether it's a personal decision. How do you choose that? So, okay, so those are two things I want to talk about. But then the other is, kind of digging into the statements that you made about segregation. I would agree in some serious ways, this issue about the coarseness of language and how imprecise it can be. I think of something like segregation versus separation, and where do you draw this line? When I think of segregation and it being different than just separation, people being in different places, I'm just thinking of you go to New York City, what's so cool about it? Like you have all these different cuisines, right? Let alone all the other things that you can do in different places. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's a really cool thing, right? Like the individuality, the creativity, and that is kind of like the good side of life, right? And like you're saying, you don't want to like squash that. On the other hand, it's like you go through certain parts of the east side of Cleveland and it's like, how is this place so poor? And I don't think it's just by chance, right? I don't think it's just bad luck, bad draw. It's like there's clearly some path dependence with history and some things that, personally, I feel like we haven't totally addressed as a country. How do you make that kind of distinction in your own mind? How do you weigh those different considerations of there's something cool and good about people sorting into places where they're around people with common interests or common passions versus the ways all kinds of societies have used labels to allocate resources differently across people? How do you think of that?
So my understanding of what you're saying is that whenever you have differences, you have on the one hand, positive sides of the difference, things that we value a lot, the fact that we have offerings of different things and we have different preferences. So it's great to actually have variety. But we also have the negative side, which you described as inequality. But in general, the whole issue that certain people can thrive while others cannot. In general, the human suffering is very unequal. And that is the main issue that we all have, right? The way I would describe this would be some form of paradox of segregation, because segregation is exactly what creates both things. I wouldn't say segregation creates both things. Difference among people is what creates both things. Segregation is just like a marker, the way you would define different people making different choices. And the moment you understand different in a very broad way and you define choice in a very broad way, everything else leads to differences that sometimes are bad, like inequality, but also differences that are sometimes good, like variety. Now, the way I would try to reconcile that paradox is, again, trying to go after the truth. I do believe that the first story, which we call positive, is at a different level than the second story, which we call inequality. The first story is almost like an imperative about how we are as conscious beings. As of now, most of the time, we have our consciousness inside ourselves. So we want to improve our own lives. So perhaps you would want Chinese food every day, while I would want sushi every day. Because we are different units of consciousness, right? Now, if we are to be intellectually honest, also, we might want to think more from the perspective of Rawls' theory of justice, which is pay attention to the veil of ignorance and start thinking, okay, so have I made any choice to be where I am right now? At least from my perspective, the moment I try to introspect on this, it's really difficult for me to believe in free will, because I started looking at everything that I have in my life, and I'm so fortunate to have a lot of things in my life. And I start thinking, okay, so how much would I give as a percentage of what I currently have to not have been born? So I was born in 1978 in Brazil from my parents. What if I was born in 1978 in Brazil, in the same town as I actually was born, but not from my parents, but from my neighbor? How much would I have given, right? And I would already give so much as a percentage of what I currently have just to not do those things. And of course, that was not my doing. I did not choose to be the son of my parents. My parents value work ethics a lot, value education a lot, and so on. And I just got all of those things for free. I mean, let's not even talk about the fact that I got the lottery ticket just by being born.
Yeah, the odds.
But then I keep going, right? Let's say that I gave 20% of what I currently have to the fact that I was not born by my neighbor's parents. The next question will be, how much would I give as a percentage of my income and all my current lifestyle? How much would I give to not have been born in Afghanistan and be born in Brazil instead? And how much would I give to not being born in 1800s versus when I was born. And I could keep going, right? How much would I give to be born, even in my hometown in 1978 by my parents, but not being born with a degenerative disease? All those things are not my doing. And I am currently here getting these benefits of all those things. The reason I'm talking about that is that I think the moment you start thinking about all those things, it gives you a little bit more humility about the fact that, yes, it just happened to be a realization of the random variable, and I'm enjoying, right?
Yeah, things good.
But also, if I am to be fully honest, I have some responsibilities here too, as in other people have had bad realizations. But then I think that's a way to reconcile the idea, that there are ways that we can all enjoy our differences, but we can figure out a way to come up with a method where the fact that I perhaps had a good realization and another person had a bad realization, we want to create some form of insurance system where those realizations do not lead to inequality of human suffering. And of course, this, for me, will lead to conversations about universal basic income. And I mean universal, not American basic income, which we can discuss in the future about this. But I just do not see a coherent way that we can be intellectually honest. You can reason me out of this, but I really, as of now, I cannot see an intellectually honest approach to life that does not involve being able to step back and realize that everything that I currently have, even though superficially it sounds like I work hard and all those things, it sounds like it's my choice, but in part I work hard because my parents work hard and I was born out of my parents. In part, I work hard because there are some hormones in my brain that enter in the right time, and I do not have a misfire of my neurons, which I could have had counterfactually, and I would not be able to recruit all this energy that I currently can recruit to do all the things that I want. I am worried that without epistemic humility and without an actual honest conversation, we cannot even go there. And again, this is where I am right now. I just don't see a coherent way to go further without acknowledging the differences at the superficial level, as in our units of consciousness are different from each other, but also acknowledge the fact that we just landed there. And there's no such a discussion as I deserve to be here. The same way as there's no such a discussion as another person who has nothing or very little deserves to be there. I don't think it's a coherent perspective, this version.
So it's interesting. There's a bunch of thoughts I have. My favorite quote from The Matrix, I think it's in the second one. It might be in the first one. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But, there's a scene where an oracle or some character that's a repository of wisdom comes out and says something like, we're all here to do what we're all here to do. I really love that quote. Like, what are the odds that we exist? We're all like essentially measure zero, probability zero events, right? What's the probability that as individuals we exist, that we're in this moment together? Everything is so small in some sense. I think of Carl Sagan responding when he saw the pale blue dot, that essay, just the thoughts he gave in response. I will say it feels like we're in a different moment right now. Okay, let's talk about that thing of I deserve or I earned. That it's something you and I have both discussed a lot. And I think the last century was really about that balance between the individual and the collective, right? That was the whole debate. And I think there's issues here where I feel pretty comfortable with the kinds of nuance that I have about that balance. It's weird because it doesn't really fit into maybe one or the other political ideologies, even just talking about meritocracy. So let's talk about that. So I will first say, did you see Stephen Durloff has a really nice new working paper about this, forward and backward meritocracy?
No, I have to take a look at it.
Stephen, it's a very cool paper. I even think the phrase merit-based for me, I think it's a little bit loaded. And when I think of Rawls, or I think of the kind of economic system I would want to have being behind the veil of ignorance, right? I would think of it as performance-based. It's maybe a little bit like Stephen's idea of forward and backward-looking meritocracy, but I think of performance-based in the sense of, in a Rawlsian sense, you want to allocate resources to individuals or groups that are most efficient with them in some sense, right? But I think that has more to do with performance rather than because they deserve it. And I think there's that value judgment. I think people have a gut reaction to it, which I kind of agree with. But I think then that what gets lost is actually, in my opinion, that is a good side of, say, a capitalist kind of economy, is that, and of course that obviously is a huge and loaded word that can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. But for me, it would be something as simple as just a performance-based economy where the way that people get resources is not by stealing them or by taking advantage of other people. It's not by being a part of the party. It's not by being whatever. It's you provide a service for someone that makes their life better, or you provide a product or healthcare or whatever it is, right? So I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
Yeah. So I guess the way I see this is from an efficiency perspective. I totally see the argument for meritocracy, right? Like if a person has a lot more resources than another person, a lot of resources to recruit, like their effort, their intelligence, and so on, and they actually do it, the pie grows faster. And if you do not incentivize them to do so by, let's say, communism, the pie will not grow as fast. I get that intuition, of course. But from the perspective of fairness, I don't think meritocracy is a well-conceived concept. I don't think it's self-coherent from the perspective purely of fairness, because of the point I told you before, because we are stepping in the story in the middle, and we are labeling certain skills that we have no merit, and we're paying based on those skills. We're giving premium based on those skills. And again, on the side of fairness per se, I think we are doing these kinds of attribution of value exposed, right?
Yeah.
But again, this is what I would call a paradox, because I completely understand that we live in a world where production of anything in life depends a lot on efforts, and efforts appear to be a decision that people make, and they would make different amounts of effort depending on whether they are given the incentive. I also think that most people think at that more superficial level, and they think that there is a key trade-off between efficiency and fairness, the way I just told you. And the more I think about this issue, I think this trade-off is less of a big deal, because we are not also thinking about the benefits of reducing unfairness. Like, for instance, we forget about the fact that we do not know the counterfactual world where there would not be only Steve Jobs in the world coming out of the United States, but there would be Steve Jobs come out of Pakistan, right? What would be the ideas that the Steve Jobs coming out of Pakistan would have had? Would we still have no cure for cancer? I don't know, right? We do not know this world, because the fact is, to the extent that intelligence and ability to think about new ideas are probably very close to uniformly distributed all over the world. The fact is, most of these extremely would-be geniuses from Brazil, from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, from all these places with very little infrastructure, most of them are not able to do anything because they are thinking on basic needs. Perhaps some of them are stunted in early childhood, and they, as a 10-year-old, are no longer capable of even doing anything of value at that level, like Steve Jobs, right? All these things we do not quite comprehend. So I do not believe this trade-off, the way people are stating, is correct. The other thing that I would say is that truth will free you, as in the more you will understand about the truth, it puts you in a better position for you to understand what's coming next, right? Because it is possible with AI that if we solve particularly the energy problem, which we haven't solved yet, but if we solve the energy problem with AI, it's possible that the whole concept of a scarcity of resources and the idea of effort, it becomes such a distraction, right? Because most of the production, most of the added value in the world might come in the future, perhaps not the near future, but maybe 50 years from now, will come out of AI, not out of us. And in a world with very little scarcity of resources, it's not like AI is going to say, hey, I don't have incentive to do this, so I'm going to exert less effort. We in economics come from this axiom of scarcity. And of course, there's a reason we do that, because it's really hard to not find scarcity in the world. But we are going into a place where it's possible that scarcity, which is our very axiom that makes us even start thinking about things like an economist, may not be as relevant. Of course, it would always be relevant, at least the short and medium runs. We always have this Schumpeter idea that the moment something becomes a little bit scarce, the price of creating new stuff to solve that problem will go up. So we all understand this, but I think we might be going to a place where with AI, the main argument for meritocracy might be diminishing, which is related to the fact that the value added, or at least the proportion of the value added coming from human beings, is going to be less a function of their effort. And it's going to still be a lot of a function of the effort of, let's say, AI, but then AI may be depending on resources that are less scarce. So the very idea of effort there may be murky.
So again, as usual, I have maybe 5 different directions we could go, but I'll try to keep it a little bit focused. I'm thinking about your comments about UBI and thinking about AI. So I've been thinking a lot recently about meaning and happiness and time allocation and time use. I guess the thing that concerns me about AI is it seems to me that work matters a lot for people, in the sense that an easy way to be unhappy is to be unemployed, right? To lose your job. That's something that really shows up in the data. Also, if you look over age, there's kind of an increase in meaning as we age. And it seems like most of that is driven by work, not leisure, not home production. So I guess the thing that concerns me is I almost think about it in terms of evolutionary mismatch. So we had this scarcity of food, we had our taste developed in a different kind of environment than now. And so it was always the case that if you wanted some sugar, it was going to be bundled with some fiber. You had to go have an apple, you had to go have an orange, something like that, right? Now we got these factories with high fructose corn syrup and ingest a lot of, the bundling is different, right? And so I think about activities and the way that we find meaning in life and the way that we feel like we've spent our lives well and our time well, right? I think there's so much of that. A big chunk of that comes from maybe finding a craft or thinking about issues and really working on those over time and getting better at those. And the other is like spending time with people and kind of what we started with, right? Just enjoying like, hey man, like there's all these similarities we have, but then there's all these little quirks of like, oh, Greg's got this thing, but he likes this or he doesn't like that or something, that it's fun to get to know each other, right? And to get to know ourselves in that same way. So some combination of that type of leisure and that type of work or that type of self-work as well, when you think about personal growth, I think those are really important. And let's say we have some huge wave of productivity. I mean, it's true that like there's a lot less scarcity and there's more than we can imagine, right? I'm thinking about that counterfactual world, which might actually be factual, not that long. It feels to me like there's still these very basic human needs that doesn't seem like we're very good at meeting them, even for ourselves, right? Even individually, it's like, it's really hard. It's a little bit like parenting, right? I was thinking about parenting the other day that like, yeah, I think I'm a better parent than I was when I started, right? And in some sense, that's not surprising. I've been a parent for a while now, but on the other hand, spent my whole life like being a human and looking at human interactions and learning and being a kid and seeing other parents and kids interact. And the fact I feel like I've gotten that much better over the past however many years, I think it points to this like fundamental difficulty of learning, right? And I think there's something very similar with ourselves and knowing ourselves, very old ideas of know yourself, right? And how hard that can be. And I don't know, having an abundance of things is going to make that easier. And that worries me.
I have two reactions when I hear that. One is, I think that is one of the many problems we need to figure out. And this is exactly why we have these kinds of meeting around here, because we need to discuss all those things. But I would like to just raise the concern that we keep using these kinds of points as a counter for whether we should do something like that. And perhaps we would like to step back and just raise the following concern. At least from my perspective, this UBI thing, this idea, is the only self-coherent way that we can actually survive as human species that I can think of. Because if you keep this arms race in AI, where China can keep investing in AI and we can keep investing in AI, different private companies in the US or elsewhere keep investing in AI because whatever the value added they generate, a huge part of it becomes their profits. If we don't instead, let's say, figure out a way of taxing the value added of AI, so much so, in fact, one might argue 100%, and redistribute, the moment we create some form of coordination, because now all this value add is taxed, that is the only possible way I can see where you don't see this kinds of arms race in AI. Now, the problem of AI, we don't know. It's just too complex, right? We don't know as of now. I have seen reasonable people telling one story, other reasonable people telling other stories. I think in principle, all of them are possible. But yes, you have the control problem, which is AI may at some point take over and maximize something that we did not quite think it was maximizing. It's a bit like when you and I go to a software like Stata and you write a command and we think we're programming Stata to do something, but then we don't have enough empathy to the machine. And the machine goes and do literally what we asked. And then we see an error code. But of course, if you are programming AI to have certain kinds of values, it's possible they are going to maximize something a little bit different. Max Tegmark has this funny story where he's considering this idea where you go and ask for a self-driving car to say, hey, can you take me to the airport as fast as possible? And then self-driving car literally does that and you die, or literally does that and does not follow any traffic laws, or literally does that and you arrive and you're vomiting or something like that, right? So effectively, when you ask a Uber driver, take me as fast as possible to the airport, what you actually mean is we all agree on certain kinds of axioms here. Just follow the rules, follow the law, make sure I survive, all those things. But take me as fast as possible, conditional on those constraints. But of course, it's possible that you may have a coding error when you don't have full empathy of whoever is receiving that message. Again, I see all these issues of control problem. I get that. But I also think there's a good argument that the problem might happen even earlier than that, right? By another human being or another private company, because the growth has been so exponential, there's going to be a moment in this exponential curve where the curve is steep enough so that the next version of ChatGPT is so much better than the previous version of ChatGPT and also the previous version of anything else that it takes over.
Yeah.
And it can shut off everything else.
It's just that powerful. That is the point.
The problem is the exponentiality, right? The moment it's going exponential, you might conceive the idea that it is so steep that the next version might take over.
Yeah.
And now that must mean full monopoly. You see what I mean? I do not see a coherent way of allowing for this arms race that would not lead to full monopoly and also pretty much close to 100% of the value added that is created in the world is owned by a company or a country or whatever. And that means, what are we talking about? Dictatorship? That is just not a self-coherent way. I think that the only coherent way that I can conceive as of now, again, I'm changing my mind almost daily on this, but the only coherent way I can see dynamically where humanity can arrive at a point where we all are okay is a world where we take out this arms race and we spread out the wealth related to all the value added that is created by AI. Now, let me just finish because you did talk about one other point, which is the idea that it's almost like we are not born to be idle. I would push back on that.
Yeah.
We know that agriculture began between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
From then on, of course, we start spending a substantial amount of time doing things that you and I might call work. But for hundreds of thousands of years before, we were hunter-gatherers. And most of the time, at least the current evidence is that we're spending about 2 hours at most working. And most of the time we were talking to each other, we were in campfires, we were actually just doing some basic work like doing nets while we were talking to each other. And as you know, our current brains evolved a disproportionate amount of time while our ancestors were hunter-gatherers versus while our ancestors were in those 10,000 years, because 10,000 years is just a glimpse in evolutionary speaking, right? So yes, our brains are probably capable of going back to the world where we work much less. Now, it's a very useful, very real question, the one you were asking, as in, we did not have abundance there. And now we have abundance. Like, does that change? I do not know. I honestly do not know. But we also see from anthropology these days, there are certain communities or certain countries where actually particularly non-working people, when they are around other people that do not work, they appear to be happy. And non-working people, when they are around people that do work, they appear not to be happy. So you see that there are some issues that there are current social norms, and we all know social norms can evolve. So the reason I'll push back is that I think a lot of what you said involve social norms, which are, as we know, there are multiplicity of equilibria that you can actually change social norms. And I think less of what you said involve a fundamental restriction of us human beings because of the way we evolve to be.
So let me reply to that in the following way. So first of all, obviously there's all these issues about alignment. I think the transition path is going to matter a lot. And I think, as you said, thinking about taxing and essentially redistribution, I agree. It feels like the only kind of future I would want to live in, or I'd want my kids to live in. I'll put it like that. So I think I actually don't even necessarily want to debate the thing about work, because I agree it could be a cultural thing. And also what I had cited before is data from the US recently, very localized. And I agree that there's a lot of stuff that can be culturally specific. But I think the broader point, though, is the issue of, we're talking about incentivizing behavior, incentivizing the choices. And I guess the point is, however we want to think about it. So it could be work, but it could be sitting around talking with other people, or it could be, maybe we want more people spending time with kids in a constructive way, right? I guess the point for me, the bigger question, which is the one that I'm thinking about a lot these days, is how do you incentivize constructive behavior? So let's imagine that we're there. Let's imagine we've got the redistribution. The pie is practically infinite. We've got all of that set up. Then it's like, okay, we're in this new regime. Like, we're just in this totally different world where now the choice set that we have in terms of activities, in terms of how we spend our time, is going to be very different. And so I guess the question is, what do we do? It's almost so much freedom that it's kind of destabilizing or disorienting, where it's like, we can do anything, right? It's almost like, imagine if you were going to live forever, right? I think there's something good about having that cap T, because it focuses your attention, it focuses your energy. You realize that you need to move, you need to do something. And especially when you think about the social side of all of this, of how we spend our time, is really important, right? Like, if we're hanging out with friends, if we're talking with them, if we're interacting with them, I think the question for me is, how are we going to navigate that? How we spend our time? I mean, how do we direct it towards constructive activities?
I completely agree. This is really hard, and we have no way of understanding even 10% of it, right? We don't know. It's just there's too much going on here. I think everybody has that epistemic humility of we don't know about this.
Yeah, right now.
But I think what people don't have, and I think it will be good to raise awareness of, is that this is, at least in my opinion, the only way out. I mean, you have two options, right? You are going to suffer for sure, at least that's how I conceive right now, right? We as human beings are going to suffer for sure, and we're going to increase suffering over time for sure. Perhaps slower, but maybe not that slow. Or we step into the abyss. And that abyss, yes, it takes a lot of courage because there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of things that we need to engineer and design. How are we going to solve the many problems that arise, the ones that we can currently conceive and the ones that we can't conceive right now? But I think right now we're spending an inordinate amount of time using arguments about, oh, it is unknown. Oh, have you thought about this problem? All those things. And we're forgetting the obvious elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is there is a train coming and you need to leave the train track.
Get off the track.
Again, I am putting my face to be slapped here by making a precise statement, which is very obviously falsifiable, which is, please argue with me. What is the alternative path that is self-coherent, that does not involve something along the lines of a full tax system on AI that gets redistributed to human beings and eventually leads to this new era where we're all essentially idle, right? And we have to figure out what we do with our lives. And my guess is that some people are going to make a lot of mistakes with that idleness, and some people are going to do good stuff with that idleness. And I do have some theories, and we can go into that, about why that will be positive, because the kinds of people that would do mistakes with their idleness will be likely to be around other people that now have more bandwidth to care about others because they don't need to work anymore. And it's possible that the error correction is going to improve because, for instance, if there's a neighbor of mine that is getting drunk now,
I have the time.
I have more time and bandwidth, and even emotional bandwidth, to actually pay attention to that neighbor who's getting drunk, and maybe I will be more well equipped to help him or her than a government would, because the government might not be even in my neighborhood, might not be even aware that they need some help. This is why I think it's a self-coherent way. I think we can get out of a lot of the mess that we can create through idleness by the fact that other people around you will be idle as well, which helps. And we can also benefit from human ingenuity. I mean, for instance, I'm a tenure professor. It's not like I need to work the amount of time I work. I work so much more than the time that I need to work. And why?
I guess that's the point, because you like it, right? And that's the thing. I think finding activities that we find meaningful or that we really enjoy in that kind of way, I think that's a really important thing. And I think it's not always easy. I think
it's definitely not easy, but I think most people have never had the privilege to even tap into searching for that in their lifetime, because they have restrictions of money and they might live paycheck to paycheck and so on. So it's possible that you're going to have a lot more efficiency. This is something we did not talk about, but another reason why I believe that trade-off between fairness and efficiency is ill-conceived is because of that. The moment you don't have this boot in your neck that you need to live paycheck to paycheck, it's possible that you're going to have a more efficient allocation of resources where certain people who might be better off being like a little league football coach in the neighborhood might be able to be a little league football coach in the neighborhood, which will free your time, if you are a neighbor, to leave your kids with him or her. And then you go and do what you think is best and so on. So all those things, I think, might generate more positive externality, because you will be perhaps more well allocated to where you are best, because people like to do something that they do better. I mean, you see kids, right? That's exactly what they do. They try all these kinds of things, and some things work, some things don't work. Right now, of course, all those kinds of allocations that happened as we were kids, we were beaten down as adults to not do those things because we need certain things, right?
Yeah. No, and it's interesting, even just thinking about parenting, even just within the nuclear family, I just think how much parenting is affected by the kinds of stresses that you just talked about. Whenever I reflect on my childhood, whenever I feel like I'm maybe more evolved than my own parents, I just reflect on the kinds of stresses I had around money. And then I think of the fact that like you said, I've been very fortunate. I haven't had those kinds of stresses, but when I have had stress, how much it affects my parenting, right? And just thinking about what interactions between parents and kids will be like, just something like that, right? In a world where those stresses are gone. I guess the only other question I would have, and this might be like 5 hours, how do you see the transition path? Because I can see the world you're talking about, and I can see it being a very cool one where I would want to live, and one where I'd want my kids to live, and one where there's a lot of good things happening. I think getting from here to there feels like it could be messy. And I guess, what would you think of as a good path to get from here to there? What would it entail?
Okay, so I have thought quite a bit about that. I wonder what you think about what I'm going to say. But first, let me just tell you one other thing which is key here related to the coherence of the point, which is AI is just one of the problems, right? We all have several other problems in mind, like global warming being another one. So I think it's also self-coherent for all other problems, because part of the problem that we currently face is that we think that, let's say, people who disagree with me when I say, oh, global warming is an extremely important problem in the world. My tendency when I'm in system one is to think that these people are idiots, right?
Yeah.
But again, when I go back to system two, I realize if I was a parent and my kid needed medicine and I live paycheck to paycheck and don't have the cash for food or for medicine for my kid, or I have some mental health issue, or I'm a single mother whose husband is in prison, all kinds of problems that are under a radar. Why would I think about global warming? To force people to think about global warming when they have many other concerns in their life, concerns of self-preservation, is just not fair, right? And my understanding is that I think this is self-coherent, right? Because I think a lot of the different opinions people have about certain issues is an illusion. It's an illusion because people are in different points of the pyramid of needs. And people are thinking about different things. So we have the luxury to even have this conversation here. We have the luxury to spend our time not being paid to have conversations like that. We have the luxury of thinking about global warming. We have the luxury of thinking about solving inequality problems when it's not like you and I have problems with money, right? Yeah. So we have the luxury of that, but other people don't. And I think a lot of the current illusion of polarization might actually reduce when we are in a more level playing field. So that's what I wanted to talk related to coherence. But let me go back now to your point, which is how do we do the transition? So here's what I thought, and I'm really curious about what you have to say about this. This goes back to this arms race and this exponential growth of AI and the fact that at some point, somebody's going to take over. We are, I think, in a very interesting age where we actually still have power to do things like that, because we still have senators, presidents, these talking heads that currently have a lot of power. But if they truly understand where we are going, they must understand that the moment that point of exponentiality shows up, they no longer have power. So currently we are in a position where the people with power, if they are fully intellectually honest and they think through where it's going to go, they must understand that that is their decision now. because they will be one of us.
Yeah.
They will
it's all
be.
going the same
There's
way.
just no way out of that. They will be one of us, but they still have power to make this decision. Maybe a year from now, they won't. But right
do they
now,
recognize
they still
that?
have
That's
power.
the issue. I think the issue is, do they recognize
And again,
that?
I agree. I do not know,
So-
recognize that. And can even go into why they don't recognize that. I think part of the reason they don't recognize that is that we're selecting politicians to not necessarily be intellectually honest people and not necessarily people that think about reality and are independent thinkers, but rather we're selecting to people that try to be almost like a compass to where most people think or what the consensus is. And the truth is the consensus is oftentimes wrong. But I think that the moment we can raise the awareness and these people with power realize that there is just no way, there's simply no way that they would eventually continue having power. There's just no way of that. I mean, the power may still stay in the United States, but you stay in a particular private firm in the United States. The power may go to China. At some point, there's going to be a new AI model that it might take over. And we're all not going to have power, and they will be one of us. So the moment this is clear, I think we might be able to go to the next step. Of course, part of the problem, and we can talk about this, is that it could be a bubble issue too. Sometimes when your stock is going to go down at some point, you still might be thinking that it's going to be a good idea to buy stock because you think that most people still think it's going to grow. So eventually you might want to time the market, right? And sell it at the right time. So I understand that some of these senators and the president might be thinking, well, this is going to be a problem for the next president, for the next senator, right? Because I'm going to be fine in my lifetime. If we raise the concern as citizens of the world so that people are aware that these kinds of people are not truly representing you in that sense, they are representing themselves because we have kids, but also even the senators do have kids. So they might not be okay with their kids being, quote unquote, enslaved in this new world, right?
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's a hopeful take on things. I guess the thing is, it's going to be a huge concentration of power. There's a recent book written called The Means of Prediction. And I think that's where we are. I think whoever controls that is going to have so much power that I do think either we're going to get into a world where they're just extracting all that surplus for themselves, which feels very ridiculous and very silly and honestly hard to imagine, but I can imagine us ending in that world. Like I could really imagine us ending up there. On the other hand, I think everyone's kind of aware of the fact that we could very easily be in a very different world very soon. And there's a need for something like UBI. I just hope that they're thoughtful enough to actually kind of go through with it and not try to resist it. I think it was Google, that part of their motto early on, or maybe it was their motto, but they definitely had the line, "Don't be evil." And now at some point they quietly took that away, right? It's like, wait, really? We've gotten to the point you can't keep that on your webpage. You can't keep that on your corporate characterization. So when I think of that, the fact that Google got to the point they couldn't say like, "Don't be evil." I think that's the kind of thing that makes me a little bit nervous, where it's like, these things seem pretty self-evident and pretty obvious that this is the kind of world that we want to live in and how we want to use these technologies. But you don't know, right? You don't know how the different incentive schemes work out so that people might hoard some of the benefits in kind of silly ways.
Yeah. Related to your question about transition, I think there are other more practical kinds of transitions that could just happen. And this is why I go back to coherence. I think it's almost like a stable equilibrium.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting, because it can happen if we raise enough awareness so that current politicians and current powerful people in the world realize, and not only politicians, I mean, even Elon Musk. Elon Musk, he's currently the richest person in the world, but he's also probably aware of the fact that tomorrow he may own nothing because of this exponential point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, if they are thinking through this, they must be aware of the fact that no one actually is safe. It's a gamble here, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It,
That's right.
now, it's possible that that would lead to big decisions of coordination among everybody so that we are entering the world I'm suggesting. But there are several different paths. I mean, the other path would be as part of that new AI model that is so much more evolved than everything else. A person hacks the bank system and now suddenly nobody has any money or everybody has the exact same amount of money. And we might go back to printing to see what we had before, but people will argue, oh, this is unfair because some people did not print what they had. So you start realizing that now the banking system collapses and perhaps the only way to go back to a normal scenario would be that everybody owns everything or something like that, right? All these would lead you to go there. The truth is we have no way to understand transition. As you know, like it's much harder to understand transition to an equilibrium versus to understand an equilibrium.
Yeah.
But we want to talk about this in the future. And I'm actually interested to understand what are the other things that we are not seeing here, right? That's the whole point, right? This is why we want to do something like that. Imagine we write a paper the way we just said here. So we don't know. That's such a multidisciplinary question that there's no path to write a paper exposing these ideas, especially because those ideas are half thought, right? They're just not fully thought. They're probably mistakes and probably wrong turns that we're going to have to do.
It's hard to see from here.
So we need a community of people and more people thinking through this. But I don't think the way to even think about this is to have the mindset of, oh, what about this? Or what about this? Because when people think about what about this, what about this problem, they are usually thinking themselves as an outsider, thinking that the default position, which is the status quo, is a good thing. And it's just not a good thing. My claim is, let's move from this status quo position of thinking that you are in a good position of power, that you think, oh, let's be paternalistic. No, this is a world where we all are going to lose power. Even the people, they are extremely selfish, that do not care about any other people. They should be in the same bandwagon. And if they are not thinking this through. Again, I could be wrong, but that's my current understanding.
I mean, I'll just say, to me, it feels like an extreme version of deindustrialization. And I think we just haven't had a good answer to deindustrialization. I think it's something that's happened over the past, however many decades. And I think a lot of people got really hurt by it. And I think we haven't had a good answer to it. And I think this is just going to be a much bigger version of that. And like you said, I think you might think that you're not going to get touched by it, but you will. And so then the question is, okay, like we're kind of all behind that veil of ignorance now, right? Like, okay, how do you want to structure things, right?
I think you just said something that I have never understood that way in terms of this analogy, but this is a brilliant analogy. We are all under the veil of ignorance because we're on the ex ante side, right? We are on the ex ante side because like a year from now, or maybe 10 years from now, even the Elon Musk of the world currently may be as poor as we are or as poor as the poorest person in the world. And that is the key. That's what I meant when I said that. Because it's like we are in a very nice position to have enough empathy with people because we're all under the veil of ignorance. That's a good way of putting this.
Yeah. Well, okay, good. Maybe we had a useful thought after however much time. Yeah, it's good, man. It's really good.